National Nancy's, the fourth in the Alex Reynolds Mysteries. Author Fred Hunter, St. Martin's Press, New York, 2000. Narrator Eric Aust. Chapter 9. We were in bed long before Mother got home. I wasn't exactly happy with the meager progress we'd made, but it was certainly a lot better than feeling worthless, as I had before, being given this assignment. Any frustration over the work was better than the frustration of not having any. I was out like a light almost the minute my head hit the pillow. I found myself in a dream version of the party we'd just attended. It was one of those unnerving dreams where everything is perfectly normal, exactly as it was when the real event actually took place. Only everything has taken on a menacing edge. Most of the guests were a ghostly white, their faces long and cadaverous. Occasionally they would bump into each other and disintegrate in a puff of dusty powder. Joe was sitting on the window seat, a set of plans sticking out of his breast pocket. Somehow I knew they were the plans for a bomb. Tony looked positively vampirish and swathed in a sort of white silk toga. Assured me he'd be able to get the plans away from Joe. Before he'd even finished his sentence, he was spirited to Joe's side. Wearing a soft core porn haze, his toga fell away as he sank his fangs into Joe's neck. I was about to scream when my attention was diverted by a drag queen who looked exactly like Ethel Mertz, wearing a geisha wig with chopsticks poking out of it, and the dress of an American Indian. She glared at me as she sang, "I'm just a girl. We can't say no." She made it sound like a threat. I put my hands to my ears and cried out, but the sound of my voice was blocked by the shriek of an alarm bell. All movement stopped at the sound of the bell, and all the guests looked toward the sky in uniform amazement. The alarm bell rang again and again. The scene suddenly melted away, and I realized through my grogginess that the phone was ringing. Peter mumbled something in his sleep, and I fumbled for the luminous clock on the nightstand. It was 2:30. I picked up the receiver and rested it against my ear. In my half-sleeping haze, I managed to say something like, "Hello? I understand you're looking for a tape?" I said, coming full awake in a rush. I understand you're looking for a tape." The voice was very strange. It sounded as if it was hitting two pitches simultaneously. "What tape?" "You know what tape. You want it. I have it." I don't know what you're talking about." "I'm not looking for anything." I was lying to draw him out, but he wasn't falling for it. "Are we going to play games, or am I going to give you the tape?" I poked Peter's side to wake him up. "If you have something incriminating, you should bring it to the police." "I can't do that," said the voice. "If I give it to them, they'll want to know how I got it, and that would get me thrown in jail. If I give it to you, you can use it however you want, and if the cops want to know where it's from, you don't know." "Huh?" Peter said as he turned over. "And now one more time. Do you want the tape?" "Yes." "Then be at Clark's office in half an hour." "You've got to be kidding," I said sharply. "Do you think I'm nuts?" "I'm not the one who blew up the other place. If you want the tape, be there in half an hour. I'm going to the office. I'll leave the tape in the top right drawer of Clark's desk." "But—" The line went dead. "What the hell was that all about?" said Peter. He'd managed to wake himself. "It was somebody who said he has the tape." "Man?" "Really hard to tell." The voice was very strange. I pushed back the covers and rolled out of bed. "Come on, get dressed." "What?" "He wants me to meet him at Clark's office." "Alex, no. You can't be that stupid. That's exactly what Jody did." "It's not like the old office," I said as I picked up the pair of briefs I'd tossed on the floor when we undressed. I slipped them on. "There's security in the new building. You have to go through a metal detector and pass a guard." "A guard who's half asleep?" "I assume the alarm from the metal detector will wake him up." "Alex, this is insane. In all likelihood, this person has already blown up one office. He could find a way to blow up this one. He said he wasn't the one who planted the bomb, I said as I pushed my arms through the sleeves of his shirt. Oh, that's all right then, Peter replied, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Why was I worried? Alex, we should call the police, or the FBI. The last thing we should do is go there. Then nobody will get the tape. If there is one. If there is one, I conceded. He said he's going to leave the tape in the top right-hand drawer of Clark's office. So what? Don't you see? He said he's going to leave it. And that means he hasn't been there yet. If we hurry, we might catch him before he plants the tape, the bomb, whatever. I paused in the middle of buttoning my shirt. Are you getting dressed or what? He rolled his eyes and climbed out of bed. I should have my head examined. He threw on some clothes and we were off. On our way out, I stopped and looked in Mother's room to make sure she was home. If she was still out, I would have left her a note so she wouldn't worry when she came home and found us gone, but she was in bed and sound asleep. Duffy, who was lying on the foot of the bed, raised his head when he heard the door and cocked it in that quizzical way peculiar to Westies. When he saw it was me, he rested his chin back down on his forepaws. I closed the door and we headed down the stairs. It wasn't until we were halfway to the back door that I thought to be relieved that she was alone. We raced back to our rickety garage, and in a couple of minutes, we were on our way to Lakeshore Drive. I can see it now. We go in there, you open the door, and we end up sprayed all over the loop, said Peter. Don't be so melodramatic. Melodramatic? This is probably the craziest thing we've ever done, and we've done a lot of really crazy things, he said as I turned onto the drive. If this person has the evidence, why doesn't he just go to the police? Because he's afraid, I said. He doesn't want anybody to know he's connected with the tape. He said something about the way he got the tape and would land him in jail. We picked up speed as we came off the short ramp and onto the drive. He heaved a frustrated sigh. That's really convenient. He can't go to the police. That's probably the very same thing he said to Jody. Alex, I want to know for my own peace of mind that you realize how incredibly insane what we're doing is. Come on, Peter. This guy can't possibly get a bomb into this building. There's a 24-hour guard. Peter was silent for a moment. Then I heard a sharp intake of breath. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. There's a 24-hour guard. Honey? Honey, don't you have to sign in after hours? Yeah, I think so. I couldn't understand why he was breathing so heavily. He turned his face to me, and it had gone whiter than the ghost in my dream. This guy that called, he doesn't want anybody to know who he is. Yeah. And if he goes to that building, he'll be seen by a guard, and he has to sign in. Uh-huh. I can't understand why he doesn't. My mouth dropped open. Ah, Jesus, I yelled as I slammed on the brakes. We swerved about halfway into the lane to our left and sent a blue Pontiac that had been running alongside us careening to the next lane over. And then we veered toward the right and ran up onto the shoulder. The car scraped along the guardrail for about 50 feet before coming to a halt. Get out, I yelled as I opened my door. This sign's stuck, said Peter. Come this way. He scooted across the seat and out of the driver's door just as a van rode by with its horn blaring. It barely missed taking off our door, not to mention us. Come on, we've got to get out of here, I cried. We ran around the front of the car, jumped the short guardrail, and scrambled down the lawn toward one of the baseball fields at the far south end of Lincoln Park. When we felt we were a safe enough distance from the car, we stopped, turned, and looked back. Both of us were out of breath from fear and exertion, but the car just sat there. The sense of relief and anticlimax were overwhelming. It had seemed so clear to me only a few seconds ago that if somebody wanted to get rid of us, the best way to do it was to put explosives in our car and make sure we were in it when they went off. And what better way of doing that than promising to give us the elusive evidence we wanted if we got to a specific place by a specific time. The same ideal seemed to have flashed through Peter's mind as well, which just goes to show that two minds, great or not, can have the same lunatic thought at the same time. We looked at each other and burst out laughing. I can't believe we've gotten so paranoid, Peter managed to choke out. I can't either, I replied, gasping for breath. Mother's going to kill me when she sees... The end of the sentence was cut off by a blast so powerful that the roof of our car shot straight up in the air and hung suspended for a moment before crashing down onto the burning interior. The hood flapped backward and sparks flew off the engine. The initial blast was followed by a second, stronger, flame-laden explosion as the gas tank blew. Although the traffic wasn't terribly heavy at that time of night, cars went careening wildly across the lanes to get out of the way, or maybe just out of surprise, and smashed against each other like some wild, out-of-control bumper car ride. Other cars on both sides of the drive screeched to a halt. Even as far away as we were standing, we could feel the heat from the burning wreckage. Peter looked at me. "You were saying?" I stared open-mouthed at the inferno. "What do we do now?" He shrugged. "I could stand by the side of the road and show a little leg and see if I can get us a ride." I stayed with the bonfire while Peter ran to find a phone to call for help. He needn't have bothered. Before much time had passed, a patrol car spotted the mess, stopped and radioed for help. The fire department made it to the scene before Peter got back, and more patrols arrived shortly after the fire trucks. In the meantime, one of the cops from the first patrol car on the scene questioned me about what had happened, while the other was busily directing traffic around the wreck. I couldn't tell him much more than the fact that the car had exploded. I didn't think it would be wise to mention a bomb, since that would have tied us up with the police for hours, if not days, to come. "You say the car blew up with no warning?" Officer Barton asked me for the third time. "That's right," he said with a sidelong glance at the burning car. "It's really amazing that you got out of it alive. I mean, if it blew with no warning." "Yeah, it is," I replied, finding it very hard to look him in the eyes. "I've never seen a car go up like that outside of the movies." The implication was pretty obvious. I was trying to think of an answer when Peter finally returned. He came up beside me and put his arm over my shoulder. "You all right?" "Yeah." "Who is this?" Barton asked. This is my husband, Peter Livesey." "Your husband?" Barton said slowly. I turned to Peter. "I was just telling her, Officer Barton, that the car blew up without any warning." "Oh," said Peter, who then looked at Barton. "That's right." Barton frowned at him. "You were in the car." "Yes, I was." "And you left the scene?" "I went to call 911. "You've been gone a long time," Peter sighed. "We're not exactly close to a phone here. I had to go all the way over to Clark Street." "Officer!" One of the firemen, who was standing about 20 feet from the back of our former car, waved to Barton. "Excuse me a minute," he said as he walked away from us. "Don't leave." "God," I thought, "you'd never get back," I said as we watched Barton join the firemen. "I couldn't find a phone. As it turned out, we didn't need to call them. The police showed up and they called the fire department." I wasn't worried about them. I called Agent Henry. He and his partner are on their way. I also called your mother. "What?" I said. On the off chance that she would wake up and hear about this on the news before we got home. "You can't be too careful." "Obviously we can't be." I never thought I'd say this about calling the FBI, but thank God. Officer Barton is pretty sharp. He already thinks there's something fishy about the way the car exploded. "That's probably because you told him it blew up without any warning. If that was true, we'd be dead." I put my hands on my hips. "You know, that's the second time in the past 24 hours that I've been accused of not being a good lawyer, as if there's something wrong with that. What was I supposed to tell him? That we jumped out of the car because I had a premonition it was going to blow?" He slipped his arm around my waist. "I'm sorry, honey." Even hearing that irritated me because there was something about the way he said it that seemed to imply that one had to make allowances for me. I was tempted to step out of his embrace, but I reminded myself that I was overtired and scared, and that when you've been married as long as we have, you do have to make allowances for each other. Barton and the firemen finished their conference. Then Barton motioned to his partner to give up the traffic directing and come with him. Mr. Reynolds. Mr. Livesey? He said as they reached us. That fireman over there, he seems to think there was a bomb in your car. And I have to say I agree with him. You have any idea why anyone would want to do something like that to you? I don't. I glanced at Peter helplessly. He didn't offer any assistance. But what's even more confusing, Barton continued, is that it looks like you knew there was a bomb in your car because you managed to get it parked and get out before it blew. I'd hardly call what I did parking the car, I snapped. You had to make it look good, he replied with a superior smile. What are you talking about? Well, if you knew the car was going to blow and you don't know anybody that want to put a bomb there, then I'd say maybe we got a case of somebody looking after some insurance money here. I don't believe what I am hearing. You think we blew up our own car? He shrugged. We think it's a possibility, don't we, Jim? His partner nodded. I half expected him to say, yup. You got a better explanation? There is one, I said. But I really can't give it. I think you'd better come with us. Really? I looked to Peter again, but he just shook his head as if he was finding it difficult to believe that we'd gotten into this situation. I heard a sigh, then said, All right, look, nobody's supposed to know this, but we're working for the FBI. Barton said after a beat. You got some identification? Well, no. I already knew how the next part was going to sound. We're working undercover? He replied again after a longer pause. It's true, I said, with the profound sense that I was sounding nuttier by the minute. The two cops looked at each other and laughed. I raised my eyebrows at Peter. Apparently, I can't even tell the truth convincingly. Peter formed his lips into an O and looked exactly like he would have liked to disavow any relationship to me. I think you guys better come along with us, Martin said, when he'd recovered himself. We can't leave here, I said. The men we report to are on their way. Come on, Barton said, growing impatient. His partner moved to Peter's side. Believe it or not, officer, he's telling the truth, Peter said. We are working with the FBI. Yeah, Barton said gently, but firmly taking hold of my arm. And we're working with the little green men. We want you back at the spaceship. He tried to move me forward, but I stood fast. I slipped my arm from his grasp. You're Area 3, right? This stopped him dead. His face went blank. Yeah, I don't work out of there, but that's my area. Why don't you radio in and see if you can get hold of Commander Frank O'Neill? He knows who we are and what we do. He stared at me for a long time, trying to figure out whether or not I was insane. And then he reached out slowly and pulled the radio off his belt. Frank O'Neill, huh? This is a joke. I'm not going to laugh. He'd barely gotten the thing to his lips when Agents Henry and Raymond arrived. They pulled up under the shoulder of Lakeshore Drive and stopped, a safe distance from the smoldering remains of our car, and then climbed out and headed across the lawn to us. Officer, Henry called as they approached. What's going on here? Who are you? Barton asked. Both of the agents showed him their identification, while Henry gave their names. Barton looked from the IDs to Peter and me as if he thought this might be part of an elaborate hoax, but couldn't fathom how we could have done it. Officer, Henry said. Barton came to attention. Yeah, sorry. These guys say that they're working for you. You know them. Henry looked so displeased that I was relieved when he didn't deny knowing us. He asked Barton again what had happened, and the officer explained what we had said and what he and the fireman believed to be true. Henry gave a nod in our direction. Well, we'll take over with him from here. Here's my card. You can reach me there anytime if you need to know anything further about this incident. As the agents led us away from the befuddled and obviously unhappy Barton, I said to Peter, what do you want to bet that if the cop calls that number, he's going to find out that he doesn't need to know anything? When we got to their car, Raymond held open the back door, and we climbed in. And then Henry got behind the wheel, and Raymond joined him in the front seat. "What? Are we under arrest?" I said. "We need to talk," Henry replied as he started the engine. "We'll go to your house." Since the explosion had occurred just short of the North Avenue exit, Henry pulled around the wreckage and exited the drive, and then headed back to Fullerton, through the park. Not another word was said on the way home, but we hadn't gone far before my hand stole into Peter's. I was much more shaken up by what had happened than I thought. Mother was waiting at the door for us. "Are you all right?" she demanded, her face fraught with concern. "We're fine," I said. "Not a scratch on us." She narrowed her eyes at me. "We'll talk about this later." "Mrs. Reynolds," Agent Henry interrupted. "I'm afraid we're going to have to talk about it now. May we?" He gestured into the living room. "Of course." The agents came in and sat down on the couch, and the three of us pulled up chairs on the opposite side of the coffee table from them. Somehow I found a little solace in the fact that we had them outnumbered. "Now," said Henry, staring directly at me, "tell us, what happened?" "Our car was bombed," said Peter. "I think that was obvious." "It is. What we want to know is why." "How in the hell would I know?" I said. "If somebody tried to kill you," said Raymond, "it means there's been a breach." When he said the word breach, I could see a row of carton arrows appear over my head, flashing wildly and pointing at me as alarm bells rang. "I don't know what you mean," I said. Henry sighed impatiently. "If the bomber targeted you, it means that he knows you're working for us. Or at least that you're working for the authorities." "How did he know that?" "That doesn't necessarily follow," Peter said. "He killed Jody. Does that mean he thought she was working for the FBI?" "I doubt it." "He must have known you were a threat." "Now, how could he have known that?" Peter and I looked at each other, then over to Mother, who also, for once, seemed to be at a loss for an explanation. I don't... I started slowly, but Henry cut me off. "You want to tell us what you were doing out in the middle of the night? Why you happened to be in the car when it was set to explode?" I stared at him dumbly. It had never been our style to tell the feds any more than we had to, because it was often difficult to know whose side they were on, regardless of the fact that they were employing us. The only one I trusted implicitly was Agent Lawrence Nelson, our boss at the CIA, and I even had some reservations about him. But in this case, we were supposed to be reporting to these guys. I just wished I didn't feel so backed into a corner. Mother suddenly broke the short silence. "Now, Alex, I really don't hold with this business of someone trying to blow you up. You tell these agents about the tape." I was so flabbergasted when she left this out that my mouth fell open. I didn't respond right away. She added, "Tell them the truth." She made it sound like she was trying to get me to fess up to breaking a window. However, there was a slight glint in her eye that seemed to add, "or at least as much of the truth as you deem right and proper." I turned to Henry. "Have you heard about the videotape?" "What?" "It seems that there is a videotape somewhere of Fritz Peterson, the Republican candidate for senator. It supposedly shows him being involved in some scandal." "How do you know that?" Raymond asked. Ace silently gulped. "It's going all around the office." "And what's supposed to be on this tape?" "We don't know, but it occurred to us that if somebody wanted to get Jody to the office to kill her, the tape might have been good bait. She was rabidly anti-Peterson. She would have done anything to get evidence on him." "What does any of this have to do with the attempt on you?" Henry asked. "Somebody called us about 2:30 and said they had the tape. We thought it might be a trap, but we decided to risk it." There was a long pause, before which both agents gazed at me without flinching. Finally, Henry said, "You thought it might be a trap. That brings us back to, how did they know to call you?" There was that corner again. All I could think of to do was plead ignorance. I have no idea, Peter said. We've been asking around about the tape since we first heard of it. We tried to be discreet, but maybe somebody thought we were being too nosy. Why didn't you tell us about this tape business before? Said Raymond. We just found out about it ourselves, I replied, and as far as we knew, it was just a rumor. Mother and Peter simultaneously did a slow take in my direction. I beamed triumphantly. After 30-some-odd years at my mother's knee, I was finally learning to lie off the cuff. She must have been proud. Well, this changes things, said Henry. You're bloody well right it does, Mother said indignantly. You people always assure us that there's no problem, no danger involved in your silly cases. And then we always end up being blown up or shot or burned to death. I think you mean almost, I said. Quite right. Mrs. Reynolds, said Henry. We were proceeding on the assumption that it was unlikely the bomber had infiltrated the office. Unlikely, but possible, according to Alex's report. Here he paused and shot a look at me that was designed to remind me that I'd left a few things out of my report. You haven't seen or heard anything suspicious. The only person we knew of connected to the office who was at all a suspect was David Leach, the young man who had a fight with Jody Lynn Hayden before she was killed. We've done extensive research into his background and have come up with no evidence that would connect him with any group that has threatened Charles Clark. But he might have been working alone, Raymond chimed in. David's not a bomber. He's an angry little queen, I snapped. Henry blinked at me. We'll take your word for that. Anyway, we thought there was a slim chance that if it had been someone in the office, they might keep working there after the bombing. That's why we asked you to keep your eyes and ears open. But now that's changed. Now it looks like the bomber really was part of the office and must still be working there. And somehow he got tipped off that your boys were working for the authorities. We're not her boys, Peter said testily. He wouldn't have objected if Mother had referred to us that way, which she often does, but it sounded condescending coming from Henry. Sorry, he said without sounding it. What you're saying about this person, whoever it is, being in the office, that's not necessarily true, said Mother. There was a fundraiser tonight. There were hundreds of guests there, and only a few were from the campaign headquarters. We asked all around about the tape at the party. That's right, I said, and the attack on us happened pretty much right after the fundraiser. Well, either way, you're out of it now, Raymond said with finality. If somebody's made you a target, we're pulling you off the case. Well, that's really nice of you, I said wryly. But pulling us out of that office isn't going to stop us from being targets. Somebody might think we were looking for that tape. But they don't know we were doing it officially. For all they know, we're still looking for it. I mean, why would they think we were professionals? God knows Jody wasn't. Was she? She didn't have anything to do with us, Henry replied stiffly. Mother laughed derisively. Now, doesn't that inspire confidence? That could mean anything from she didn't know you personally to she wasn't working for your department. Your lot never gives us the whole truth. The amazing thing was that she managed to sound so indignant when we never give them the whole truth either. Mrs. Reynolds, I assure you that Jody Lynn Hayden was not working for the government. There was a pause, then he added with some obvious discomfort. At least, to my knowledge. Just like you assured us that the case wouldn't be dangerous. It doesn't matter anymore because you're out of it. The hell we are, said Peter. In the first place, we were working in that office because we support Charles Clark's campaign, long before you came along and asked us to spy. In the second place, as long as somebody's trying to kill us, you're going to be damn sure we're in it. And we're going to stay in it until we find out who killed Jody and who tried to kill us, I added. Not officially, you're not, I squinted at him. When you checked our backgrounds, you didn't spend very much time talking to Lawrence Nelson, did you? Why? Because he would have warned you that we're much, much more trouble when we're left to ourselves. The agents tried to convince us that without any official standing, it would be lunacy for us to continue investigating. But they had no way of knowing how lovingly we embraced lunacy. They warned us that we would get no assistance from them whatsoever, and that if we got in the way of an official investigation, we would be dealt with accordingly. However, it was difficult for them to make much of an impression on us while Mother was giving them the bum's rush out the door. "Well, that was fun," I said as she closed the door after them. "We haven't thrown federal agents out of the house for ages." Mother wheeled around and faced me, her expression anything but amused. "What on earth did you mean, going sleuthing in the middle of the night? Didn't I bring you up better than this?" "We didn't have much of a choice. The callers said now or never." "Honestly, Alex, you knew. That was exactly how Jody was lured to her death, and yet the minute you got a call, off you go, like a rabbit after the hounds." Huh?" She turned to Peter. "And I would have thought that you'd have had little more sense." "I don't suppose it would help to say that I objected at the time," he replied. "But you went along with him anyway." "Will you please stop acting like he's my keeper?" I said in a very unlovingly tone. "The moment you stop behaving as if you need one," she replied grandly. "Look, we figured it might be a trap, but we thought if it was, it would be at the office, and as long as we knew where it was, we could try to avoid it. We had no idea the car would be the trap." "Forgive me for pointing this out, darling, but I believe it's the element of surprise that makes it a trap." "She has you there, honey," said Peter. "The point is," I said testily, "that we had to take the chance. It might have meant getting the tape." "Pucker the tape," said Mother, giving way to a rare bit of profanity. I'll bet British profanity, which just sounds quaint. "How could we ever have been so foolish as to ask about that tape the way we did?" I said. "What I don't understand is why you wanted me to tell the FBI about it. I thought our policy was don't tell even when asked." "Because I want them to find the bloody thing," she exclaimed. "If somebody's trying to kill you because you know about it, then the authorities bloody well better find it and make sure everybody knows about it." "That's just the trouble," said Peter, "according to Mary Lynn Hayden. Jody was afraid that if it fell into the hands of the FBI, they wouldn't make it public." "Did you learn anything at all at the party?" I asked Mother. "Only that Tony knows some rather salacious old men," she replied through her aquiline nose. I introduced the subject of the videotape to several little cadres of them, and rather than giving me information, they seemed desperate to hear the details of the tape from me. Some of them fairly slathered. It was quite unattractive. "You didn't get anything at all," she sighed heavily. "Nothing that was any help, I'm afraid. Most people were more than willing to speculate about what was on the tape, but even that was rather one note." "Let me guess," said Peter. "Popular opinion is that if the tape exists, it's of Fritz Peterson caught in a homosexual tryst." "Exactly." I snorted with disgust. "Sometimes I wonder if Joe Gardner is right. Maybe we are our own worst enemies." "So what are we going to do?" said Peter. "Do we proceed on the assumption that there is a tape, or that there isn't?" "Oh, I think we can be fairly certain that the tape exists now," said Mother. "Why?" I asked. She smiled in response, waiting for me to get it, but I didn't. "Because somebody tried to kill us," said Peter. I might be willing to believe it didn't have to exist in order to get Jody to that office, but if somebody is willing to kill 2 more people merely out of fear that they know about it, then I have to believe it's real." She shook her head. "I still can't believe the 2 of you were willing to rush into a trap knowing what had happened to Jody." "You know, there's something that puzzles me about that," I said. "I mean, when the call came, we took it seriously because we knew what had happened to Jody. But I wonder why she took it so seriously." "What do you mean?" Peter asked. "Well, if we'd gotten a call like that out of the blue before any of this other stuff happened, I would have just thought it was a crank, wouldn't you? I don't think I would have gone running out after it. But didn't Mary tell you that Jody was daft on the subject of getting evidence against Fritz Peterson? Mother asked. Daft, maybe, but wouldn't you still be weary of going to meet someone at 5 in the morning in a deserted place on the strength of an anonymous call? Oh, yes, Mother said, nodding. I see. She must have had a reason for believing there was a tape. And she must have known the caller, I added. Not necessarily. You didn't know him and you went. That's true, but that just proves that what I was saying. She must have already known there was a tape. Peter said, we need to talk to Mary again. I don't think Mary could know anything. Why not? Because if she did, she'd be dead. Hell, somebody tried to kill us just for mentioning the tape. I don't think it was just for that, said Peter. I think it was because we asked about it in such a way that it made the killer think we were looking for it. At least he was quite gracious enough to say we. But I still think we need to talk to Mary as soon as we can, he continued, because even though she might not know anything about the tape itself, she might know what Jody was doing to try to get evidence on Peterson. You're right, I said, because that led to her death. Just see to it that it doesn't lead you down the same path, Mother said soberly. Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold. To offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides. And in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.